Do you remember the movie that made you fall in love with cartoons? Maybe it was one your parents took you to see in theaters, or a favorite on VHS that you can still recite word for word. We hold these films dearly, but can you recall what it is that made you want to see them in the first place? What was it that helped put these formative animated features on your radar? Nowadays, movie trailers are the primary form of advertising, with unlimited worldwide reach thanks to the internet, and in some cases, they're just as anticipated as the movies they're promoting. Long before trailer premieres, cast interviews, and behind-the-scenes featurettes, the prevailing method to raise public awareness for an upcoming animated film was with a poster. These works of art captured our attention with brightly colored characters posing for young, obsessive minds, and the only way we could get the gnawing wonderment out of our psyches was to watch the movies. Whether or not they would exceed expectations or miss the mark entirely and exist as a misguided detour was anyone's guess. But it never put a damper on my enthusiasm for the poster in the slightest, and in fact, would be a key factor in considering giving even the most disappointing movies a second chance based on the nostalgic attachment I had for the image. In this video, we'll be looking at a mix of movie posters, VHS and DVD cases, adjacent advertising materials, and short recollections of the films based on what I remember about them from all those years ago. They're pieces of animated history, but more importantly, a piece of my history. Let's look back at a few of my favorite movie poster memories. As a very young child, my family didn't live near a movie theater, and we didn't have television channels that showed cartoons. So a majority of my earliest experiences with animated movies came by way of VHS tapes. One of the first cartoons I ever remember watching was The Adventures of Scamper the Penguin. There are few movie covers that convey this level of unadulterated glee. The unyielding, cheery stare from two cute baby penguins with the happiest dog ever drawn in the background. These three make you want to see the film just to find out what's making them all so ecstatic. Released in the US in 1987, the film is a joint production between Russian and Japanese parties and centers around Scamper, a rambunctious, newly hatched penguin with a penchant for getting himself into all sorts of trouble, resulting in him and a pair of other little penguins getting lost and having to find their way back home. The animation is a refreshing change from the usual Disney style that had become the standard of the time, and there's so much cuteness to be had here. They actually exceed their VHS cover counterparts. The voice acting is sickeningly sweet, and Scamper might be the most adorable sounding character ever.
Oh, let me tell you about the incredible adventure I just had.
Scamper!
Watching Scamper discover the world around him, sliding down a snowy hill, or encountering humans, it remains one of my favorite children's movies to this day. But intermixed with these precious happenings are some unexpectedly intense scenes featuring very scary animals. Hungry seagulls are always looming overhead, terrorizing the penguins as they try to make them their lunch, and things only escalate when they encounter a razor-toothed seal and a frightening orca whale. That's not to mention the sailors who want to abduct all the baby penguins so they can sell them to a zoo. It's nowhere near the levels of graphic violence or disturbing imagery of Watership Down, but I could see these scenes as being a bit scary for younger children. Still, I stand by saying that it's a must-watch if you're looking for a different kind of film made for little ones. The theme of talking animals continued in my household with another offbeat film, We're Back, A Dinosaur Story. Produced by Steven Spielberg and released in November of 1993, there must have been high hopes that it would follow in the footsteps of an earlier Spielberg release that year, Jurassic Park. It unfortunately wasn't the case, but there's still plenty to like about it. The cover showcases the starring dinosaurs, but I was never completely sold on their designs. They're fun and goofy looking, but still come off to me as less appealing versions of the Land Before Time's dinosaurs. It also has the most inexplicable tagline for a movie I've seen: wish for a dinosaur and watch all your dreams come true. It is beyond completely nonsensical, and there should be a mandatory rule that every movie has to use this as their tagline from now on. It's too funny for it not to be. The movie's story is a scientist travels back in time aboard a UFO and turns a group of dinosaurs into intelligent, more approachable, kid-friendly versions of themselves, so he can take them to the Museum of Natural History, where children can learn about them, which is sort of like Jurassic Park in a way. The kids' side characters are fun, and the little girl is voiced in a rare appearance from Yeardley Smith, which is the only role outside of The Simpsons I think I've ever heard her in.
Who are you? And what's that?
The real star of the movie, though, is Professor Screw-Eyes, the master of fear, who powers a circus with the screams and terror from his audience. He wants to devolve the dinosaurs into fearsome creatures to star in his traveling circus, but his cunning and evil only get him so far, and he falls victim to the most haunting end to a villain in animation history. It's not the deepest movie, but it's a breezy little film that's worth a watch if you're so curious. If not, I'd recommend its exceptional Game Boy game. For a movie where the main antagonist is essentially fear, it didn't scare me in any real way. But just as Scamper had hidden the fearsome animals behind its upbeat cover, the brave little toaster had a deceptive title, not giving any indication that it would contain the ultimate anxiety-inducing scene, where the sentient air conditioner comes to terms with his own mortality and has a literal meltdown. He goes from cynical to losing his mind in a matter of seconds, before bursting into a screaming electrical fire that puts him out of commission. The only other scene I remember is the song called Worthless, where a sea of broken down cars sing about how they can no longer function and come to accept their destructive fates. It's a dark song if you listen to the lyrics, but even if you don't, seeing these cars meet their ends is definitely spooky. At some point, my family must have picked up some additional tapes at garage sales or secondhand stores, because we did have a few cassettes of animated show episodes in our collection too. I had 2 tapes of the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. One had the episode Mario Meets Koopzilla, where King Koopa becomes giant, so Mario eats super sushi to get huge too. I always thought that sushi plate looked so delicious. Maybe the best seafood dish in cartoons. The whole affair is a supremely fun homage to Godzilla movies. These 2 titans battling each other, it combined my 2 favorite things as a kid, the Mario Brothers and Godzilla. A perfect episode. The other one I had was Mario's Magic Carpet, another great episode that I will forever associate with Steppenwolf's song Magic Carpet Ride, which was featured in a flying carpet chase scene. One thing that bothered me about this tape though, the genie in the show looks fine, but it's not the same genie on the cover, not even close. I've always wondered about this. Did they draw the cover first? Was it leftover promotional art they used for the VHS cover? I'm afraid to say, we may live forever in a world where we don't know the true identity of this mysterious genie. Mario Mania was at its peak in the 1980s and 90s, possibly equaled only by the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. My favorite turtle is Leonardo, and I never understood why on some of the VHS covers for series episodes, Leo's katanas are completely red, from the handle to the blade. I'm assuming it had to do with the controversy of the turtles using weapons, but it definitely could have been worse. He could have had his weapons changed out like Michelangelo did. I felt bad for people who liked Michelangelo, because his weapons changed at one point from his classic nunchucks to grappling hooks. But looking back, I think it could have been a unique opportunity to introduce secondary weapons to the fore. The Ninja Turtles VHS I had was called The Turtles Awesome Easter, and strangely has nothing to do with Easter other than the rabbit character Hokum Hare pretending to be the Easter Bunny in one of the episodes. The standout here is Once Upon a Time Machine, where Shredder travels to the future so he can take over a world with no turtles in the way, but they end up following him and get to see their elderly future selves. It's the first time I remember seeing 2 sets of the same characters interacting with each other. It was such a novel concept at the time, and the episode more than lives up to its creative story. You couldn't just watch the show on its own though. You had to have your Ninja Turtles toys close by. I had 3 that I was particularly fond of. One was Pizza Tossin' Leo, and there was nothing as satisfying as seeing him shoot a pizza from his wearable pizza oven on his chest. The second was a Leonardo Stretch Armstrong. I love the detail on the box of Shredder holding Raphael's foot and Raphael stretching away from him. And the third, which was the simplest but my favorite, was the Somersault Samurai Leo. You bend him at the hip, then watch him flip. One movie cover that always gave me false hope that it would be more memorable each time I decided to watch it was Disney's Oliver and Company. But alas, the cute kitten and cool dog on the cover were too much for the actual film to live up to. hands down the best part is the remarkably underrated song, Why Should I Worry, sung by the star of the movie, Billy Joel. Say what you will about the movie, but it does the one thing that no other Disney song managed to do: be an actual song. There were other Disney songs that had more success and are better remembered, but this one I listened to as a song by a real artist rather than a cartoon song, and that is quite an accomplishment. Keeping on track with Disney, The Adventures of Ichabod Crane and Mr. Toad is a movie I'm ashamed to say that I've never watched the full way through. I was a massive fan of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I loved the story of the sleazy Ichabod Crane pitching woo to the women of the town and coming across the Headless Horseman, cloaked in all black, wielding a sword in one hand and a flaming pumpkin in the other, and was what I remember to be the first truly malevolent force in cartoons, and one that's still chilling almost a century later. The movie cover never quite landed for me. The title was called The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, and I'll be the first to admit fault because I went in expecting it to be a crossover movie, so you can imagine my confusion and subsequent disappointment when the cover only featured Ichabod and there were two non-intersecting movies. When I found out there was no meeting between the two, I never felt any desire to watch The Wind in the Willows, and that's something I hope to eventually rectify. My dream was eventually realized in the smallest of ways, when the 50th anniversary cover featured the two tipping hats at each other. It only took 5 decades, but technically, they finally met. Disney movies are of course iconic, and there may be no more well-known style of VHS tapes than the white clamshell cases. They're the classic Disney movie posters laid over all-white casing, and there's no mistaking them. If you had them as a kid, you were very lucky. This would be the case with my extended family, who owned a majority of these movies, and would act as the catalyst for my dive into watching the entirety of the Disney catalog. No Disney collection would be complete without The Lion King, showcasing possibly the most famous Disney scene of Rafiki presenting Simba to the animals of the savannah. The Stampede, the Elephant Graveyard, Scar's song. Even on my extended family's tiny living room TV, the movie still felt massive. As common as the Lion King VHS tapes were, I didn't know anyone but them that owned a clamshell copy of The Great Mouse Detective, one of Disney's black sheep films. It was so different from anything else in the company's catalog. A Sherlock Holmes-inspired mouse, a dastardly violent villain, and a contemporary setting made it stand out. And I'll always prefer its original clamshell cover of the smiling protagonist having so much more personality than the later, minimalist, and less charismatic solo cover. If the front of the original VHS cover didn't entice you though, then maybe the exciting back of the box did, featuring the mice swinging from a rope in front of Big Ben. Apparently Disney liked the concept of mice swinging on ropes so much, they used the same thing for the cover of The Rescuers Down Under, though the back of the box is more unsettling than anything else, with the movie's bad guy just hovering above the happy heroes. Aladdin is one of the greatest animated features of all time, but poses a unique case where its sequel's cover may be better than the original. The first Aladdin has everything pertinent to the movie, but with Jafar looking into the crystal ball for the second one, I'd say there's a strong argument to be had that it's not only better than the first, but I wouldn't be disappointed if it replaced the original's cover altogether. When I was getting a little older and going to the movies became a more feasible activity, it happened to be around the time that I was deep into Pokemon. Whether it was the games, the trading cards, or the TV show, I didn't think anything could exceed what I had been experiencing for these few years, until I saw the poster for Pokemon, the first movie. Seeing Mewtwo, the ultimate and legendary Pokemon, appearing on the same poster as Mew, a Pokemon that was more of a rumor than a reality in the United States at least, facing off in the ultimate Pokemon battle, nobody knew what to expect. But in that theater, it was the greatest night for that room full of kids, and well exceeded the hype. Pikachu's Vacation, a ridiculously fun mini-movie that surprised everyone by playing before the main feature, a newly remixed version of the Pokemon theme song to open the movie, and getting to be the first to see brand new Pokemon. For me, Pokemon never got better than that night. Revisiting these old cartoon movie posters and cover arts made me realize the sentimental value these images carry for me. Not just that they made me remember these movies I enjoyed, but they took me back to specific places in my life that I seldom return to, which brought me to a sad realization I had through all of this. Streaming services have given us the incredible gift to watch cartoons of any and every type, but when you go to search for one, you don't always see the original box art. Sometimes it'll be a still promotional image or just a screenshot from the cartoon itself. And some on-demand platforms don't even give the option to see a poster, and if they do, they're these glossy, extreme close-ups of a character's face. There's no artistic value or even effort. It's the bare minimum to let you know what you're watching. The true heart of any animated movie or series you watch will undoubtedly be what it offers on the screen, and that's always the conversation we should be having. But when talking about cartoons in an all-encompassing way, posters and cover art should be considered in that discussion, because in the end, they're not just movies, they're memories.